Today, we're going to be talking about some Warhammer 40k tactics and ways that you can easily improve your game with 5 pretty common mistakes that players make not taking full advantage of the Warhammer 40k mechanics. Let's do it! What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and let's talk about some Warhammer 40k tactics. First off, if you like this kind of tactical content and you want me to do more of it, I don't do enough, I think, on this regular channel. And then go ahead, drop the video a like, drop a subscribe down below. Helps let me know what kind of content people like, and then I can make more of it. Also, quick shout out to the Advanced Tactics series. Over on the channel, you can get access to it if you are a YouTube channel member, which you can join in the link down below the video. We talk about really heavy tactic stuff in there and get really deep onto various topics in Warhammer 40k. But without further ado, let's talk about some common mistakes people make and ways that you should be using the Warhammer 40k core rules to your advantage. So the first mistake I see people make pretty often is not sequencing attacks correctly. What I mean by this is not performing your attacks in an order that allows you to deal the maximum damage to whatever units you're shooting at. Now, to demonstrate this, I've hopped in Tabletop Simulator here, and we have a unit of Space Marine Terminators fighting a Redemptor Dreadnought. Now, a Redemptor Dreadnought has a bunch of different weapon profiles, all of which do slightly different things. So I think it's a pretty good indicator of this interaction. We have these unit of Terminators, which are 3 wounds apiece. Let's say that we've dealt 2 wounds with previous shooting, maybe some bolt guns went into these guys, and one of these models is down to 1 wound. So we'll say 1 wound left. Your first instinct when you go to select that Redemptor Dreadnought to fire is to fire its big arm weapon first. In this case, the big Plasma Eradicator, to deal the maximum damage before you go on to your smaller weapons. But because we only have 1 wound left on a Terminator, we would be giving up additional damage if we fired that plasma weapon first, because the plasma cannon's multi-damage, because the wounds have to be allocated to models in the unit that are already wounded. That multi-damage hit would go through on the model with 1 wound left, and it would overkill them by X amount. If it's 2 damage if it's not overcharged, 3 damage if it's overcharged. So the 2 damage profile would deal 1 wound over what you need to kill the Terminator with only 1 wound left. The 3 damage profile would deal 2 damage over, and those wounds would be lost to the ether. That would be additional wounds assigned to an already destroyed model, and those would be gone. But, fortunately, the Redemptor Dreadnought is armed here with a pair of Storm Bolters as well as a heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon. Now, as the controlling player of the Redemptor Dreadnought, you're allowed to sequence your attacks in whatever order you want. The only stipulation is that you have to make subsequent attacks from weapons with the same profile back-to-back. So, for example, I have to shoot all of my Stormbolter attacks in a row, then I can shoot either all my Plasma Cannon attacks or all of my Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon attacks. Some people like to pull all these attacks and maybe use different colored dice and put them all in one big ball and roll all those together. That's technically not correct. Technically, you do have to roll all of the attacks of one profile together, and you can fast dice those rolls all together if you want, but then the next weapon, as long as it has a different profile, would have to be rolled separately. But in this case, we can use that to our advantage. So, for example, if this Terminator has 1 wound left, we can choose to roll all of our Stormbolter attacks. So that would be, in this case, 8 Stormbolter attacks because we're in rapid fire range. If you get 1 wound through the armor save of the Terminators, that will deal that 1 damage to the wounded guy. If that doesn't work, we also have the Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon. We can try to deal 1 additional wound with that before then shooting our Heavy Macroplasma. Now, if we do kill that model with 1 wound left, and the Plasma Cannon is overcharging, now every single successfully converted attack out of the Plasma Cannon will kill another Terminator, which means that you're not going to be basically losing these extra damage points by killing a model that's already wounded. You're just going to be straight up killing entire Terminators, which is much more efficient. Now, this doesn't sound like that big deal, an additional 1 or 2 wounds inflicted over a unit because of the sequencing, but when you consider that you can do it across your entire army, you start to kill several additional models every time you go to shoot. Now, we can look at this on even a little bit more of a macro level as well. Let's take the same Terminator unit, a 3 wound per model unit, and say that one of them has taken 1 damage, maybe from some bolt guns, maybe even this tactical squad fired their bolt guns first, and were able to inflict a single damage. Then, we also have 2 2 units on the enemy side. One of them a tactical squad with a plasma gun, the other one a devastator squad with 4 multi-meltas. Now we are in the melta range on this unit, so those multi-meltas are going to deal a minimum of 3 damage. So every converted multi-melta attack is going to kill a Terminator. Now obviously one of the Terminators has already been wounded, which means that if one of those multi-meltas converts, assuming the devastator squad fires first, we're going to have some bleed over damage that isn't going to count. However, we have a 2 damage weapon that's waiting in the wings to attack, so we might as well try to pick off that last 2 wounds with an overcharged plasma shot. So in this case, the correct sequencing of attacks would be to select your tactical squad with the plasma gun to fire first, overcharge the plasma gun, and fire into the Terminators. If one of those wounds go through, it kills a Terminator who was already wounded. Then you can activate your Devastator squad, and they would shoot all of the multi-meltas into the Terminators. Every single converted wound roll out of those minimum 3 damage melta shots is going to kill an entire Terminator with some bleed over damage because of the D6, but the minimum damage is going to kill them. So sequencing attacks isn't only important for firing multiple weapons out of a single unit, although it would still be important for both of these types of Blood Angels units we have here. Obviously, the Devastators will have a bolter in their unit because of the Sergeant, and the tactical squad is going to be combining bolters with that plasma gun. So you can potentially try to, for example, if you were firing at the Terminator squad without any wounds dealt to it, you could try to deal a single damage with one of the bolt gun shots, then overcharge the plasma to finish off that last model in the unit, just to try to deal that damage efficiently. That's an example of internal sequencing during a unit's shooting activation, but it's also a big deal for choosing the order in which your units fire in order to deal damage the most efficiently. There's definitely an impetus for somebody to just choose their biggest weapon to shoot first and shoot at whatever they have in line of sight and just see what happens. That's not always the case, because sometimes you're going to be shorting yourself a couple additional wounds that you could be getting if you sequenced your attacks in a better order. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is pretty similar to attack sequencing, and that is correct application of your offensive profiles into their most optimal target profiles. If you're an army with a lot of different weapon profiles, for example, Space Marines, each individual unit has 3 or 4 different weapon profiles on them, or you're looking just to deal the most damage the most efficiently early on in the game, applying your offensive profiles to the targets that they're going to be most effective against is very important. I see a lot of people just aim all their guns at one target and fire away, and there ends up being a lot of inefficiency in their attacks. Now, what target a weapon is efficient at shooting depends on A, the comparative offensive and defensive profile, so mostly their strength versus toughness value, and the type of defenses that the target has. Generally speaking, you want to get your weapons to a point where they wound on 2s or 3s, which means you want to attack targets that are either 1 toughness lower than your strength or half of your weapon's strength. It should also go without saying that hitting models with a high armor save with a high AP value is also good, but the comparative damage versus the number of wounds that the target has is also a big deal. Generally, you want to hit a model with a high enough AP value to put them up onto whatever invulnerable save they're on. If they're infantry, you should also keep in mind that they could potentially have cover, and so there's going to be instances where over-committing on AP values is pretty useful. In addition, you want to be able to kill your target with no bleed over damage. So killing 1 wound targets with 1 damage weapons is great, but also killing 2 wound targets with 2 damage weapons, or attacking large vehicles with wounds counts that are divisible by the damage characteristic of your weapon. For example, hitting a 6 wound vehicle with a 3 damage weapon means you only need to convert 2 attacks, whereas most higher damage weapons would also have to convert 2 attacks, making them inefficient at targeting that. To make this the most efficient, you want to be attacking your targets with weapons that don't have stats that much greater than what you need to be dealing damage to them. So, for example, attacking a toughness 4 target, you probably want to attack them with strength 5 or strength 8 weapons, because you're not overpaying for any additional strength value in order to get the minimum value to be wounding on 2s or 3s. In the same way, you want to match up your armor penetration profiles with whatever the save on your target units are, and the same for damage. So for example, let's look at some defensive profiles. I think a Space Marine Vanguard veteran is a pretty good indicator of a popular model with a profile that can be teched against relatively easily. A Vanguard veteran is a toughness 4 model with 2 wounds, and typically they'll have a storm shield equipped, so they go to a 2+ armor save with a 4+ invulnerable save. That means that the most effective weapon to attack them with is a strength 5 or strength 8 weapon with an AP value of 2, although potentially AP 3 or ignoring cover is also good because they are infantry, and a damage characteristic of 2 to match their wounds count. You can imagine that would be something like a heavy bolter in the Devastator Doctrine is going to be the most efficient profile. A standard toughness 7, 12 wound vehicle, like a lot of the basic vehicles in the game, you'll want to attack with a strength 8 or higher weapon with a high EP value unless they have an invulnerable save, and probably a damage characteristic of 3 or 4. A 3 damage weapon obviously only needs to convert 4 attacks to kill that target, whereas a 4 damage weapon only needs to convert 3. If you can get a 6 damage weapon out of there, that'd be pretty good. So in the future, if you have a lot of different weapon profiles or you're trying to deal the maximum damage, consider the comparison between your offensive profiles and the target's defensive profiles when you're going to attack them. Just like sequencing your attacks effectively gets you a lot of additional efficiency out of your army, targeting your attacks intelligently against profiles that they're good at attacking means that your army is going to be dealing damage faster than it would be if you just dumped all of your attacks into a single target. Sometimes you just really need to kill something and you have to get it done now, and you're going to attack them even if it's inefficient. But a lot of times, if you're just trying to attrition your opponent down to nothing, this is going to be the best way to do it. Now, this next one is pretty simple. It's something that I see pretty often and kind of surprises me. It's just simply not using pile-ins or consolidates, and not necessarily not using them the most efficiency, because that is a very complex part of the turn, doing fight phase movement. But I do see a lot of players just simply not take those additional inches that are just up for grabs. So, for example, if we have these Gene Stealers here, there's a couple things we can do once we charge. So they charge into the Tactical Marines. And one thing that's important to keep in mind is to basically, after your charge move, assuming that you're not expecting an interrupt out of your opponent, you basically should never move into base-to-base contact with the unit that you're charging, because if you do, you won't be able to pile in or consolidate, so you will actually be shorting yourself some movement. As soon as that Gene Stealer unit is selected to fight after that successful charge, they can move 3 inches, each one ending closer to the closest model. So you can, move your models in so that they can get closer to that enemy. Now, some interesting things you can do here, for example, is if you charge and swing your models out like this, because you just have to end closer, you don't have to move directly towards the models, you can use your movement to sort of move around the unit you're attacking, and that can actually get you some significant forward momentum. That's called orbiting. Essentially, you start at, let's say, 2.6 inches here, and all that means is that my movement has to end 2.5 inches away from the target. So I could go like this. I've basically just moved directly forward, but technically I'm still ending closer to the closest enemy model, so that move is totally legal. So that's a way that you can use that pile in and consolidate movement to just move around the table. But some other things you can do with it are tri-pointing, which is a pretty common tactic. Basically, as long as you put 3 of your models equidistant from each other touching an enemy model, that enemy model would not be able to fall back without moving over your bases, which means the unit would be trapped there and be unable to fall back. Some things you can do, for example, are charge in such a way so that you put models from another enemy unit as the closest models to your unit. You can't end your charge within an inch of them, but you can end your pile-in and consolidates within an inch of them. It will just bring them into the combat and they would get to attack. But you are not allowed to attack them, which means there's no risk of you killing models in the unit. So, for example, we could charge so that our Gene Stealers, will pile in to fight the Tactical Marines, most likely kill them, or at least deal significant damage to them, and have these models pile in towards the Devastators. Not only will that engage the Devastators in melee, but it also means that we can use our Consolidate move to tri-point them, so they would be unable to fall back. These are a lot of the really useful things you can do with pile-in and consolidates, and I see a lot of people not even take those movements and really short themselves a lot of additional utility on the table and a lot of forward movement. Like we said before, if you just want to orbit around the other units, you can use this to gain an additional 6 inches of movement in the fight phase, which means even if you're not moving up to objectives or engaging enemy units, you can literally just be making your future charges easier. Even if your Gene Stealers come in, they all fight the tactical squad, they remove the tactical squad with ease, and they just move 3 inches forward with their Consolidate towards the closest enemy unit, even if they don't engage anything else. That means that you're that much closer to the heart of the enemy army next turn, and that your charges in the future are going to be 3 inches closer. And if that's all the benefit you get out of that Consolidate movement, that's fine. But also keep in mind all of these other cool things you can do with those movements. Now, in order to counteract them, another thing that I see players not do pretty often is basing enemy models. When you're in base contact with an enemy model, you cannot perform pile-in consolidate moves. Not only can you not end closer to them because you're as close as possible already, but also even if you have abilities that say, like, you can consolidate in any direction, not necessarily towards enemy models, you also can't use those. So, for example, if the Gene Stealers had come up to engage the Devastator squad, what the Devastator squad could do is just use that pile-in consolidate to put themselves in base contact with as many Gene Stealers as possible. Now, all of those Gene Stealers that they've touched can no longer pile in and consolidate and can no longer get the benefits of that additional movement in their future fight phases. That can be a pretty big deal, especially, again, if your opponent's trying to get additional movement out of it, trying to get to objectives, trying to just circle around your army. All of those are blocked by just putting your models in base-to-base with your opponents. So in order to get the most efficiency out of your models in 40k, definitely don't forget those fight phase movements and all the cool things you can do with them. Now, sort of tangentially related to that fight phase movement, and another rule I see players not using or not playing around pretty often is Heroic Intervention. Heroic Interventions let a character at the end of your opponent's charge phase move towards the closest enemy unit as long as there's an enemy within 3 inches of them. They don't necessarily have to end in melee, but they are allowed to move as long as any enemies are within 3 inches after that charge phase. The enemy doesn't even have to have charged, so even if they're just standing there within 3 inches of you, that character can jump in and attack them. One thing that's important to keep in mind is that heroically intervening does not count as charging. There are a lot of people who misplay it that it does. It doesn't do that. There are just a lot of rules that typically trigger on both heroic interventions and charges, like Shock Assault. So these Space Marines get +1 attack for heroically intervening. They also get +1 attack for charging or being charged. Heroically intervening also makes you attackable by enemy chargers, even if they didn't declare you as the charge target, so there is a little danger involved. But one thing that you can use this rule for is using your characters to sort of ward off any enemies from getting into your own units. For example, we have a Space Marine Smash Captain here who's essentially embedded himself inside this Tactical Marine squad. Obviously, we don't really want the Tactical Marines to get attacked by these Gene Stealers over here, so what we've done is placed the Chapter Master such that he's within 2 inches of the front edge of the Tactical Marines bases in the unit. What this means is that when an enemy unit moves in and successfully charges within 1 inch of these Tactical Marines, they are automatically going to be within 3 inches of the Chapter Master, and that means they're automatically going to be triggering his Heroic Intervention. We've also left a little bit of a space in the center here so the Chapter Master can actually move through, because even if he has a jump pack, you do not ignore other models when you fly with a Heroic Intervention, so that's also important to keep in mind. But it does mean that anywhere these Gene Stealers go, they're going to be triggering that Heroic Intervention and making that Chapter Master move 3 inches towards them. If your opponent is looking to do some pile in and consolidate shenanigans, if they have ended their charge too close to you, you can use that Heroic Intervention to move to base contact with them, so they will not be able to perform pile-ins or consolidates with those models who are based. There's just a lot of stuff you can do with 3 inches of extra movement, and it's important to keep your characters in those defensive positions where they can react to enemy units that are threatening their buddies or charging into them. Now, I've got a little objective marker down here. I mean, a bit of a shameless plug. You can actually get the real-life physical versions of these objective markers in the link down below in the video description. Our buddies over at 3D6 Wargaming make them, and they look great, let me tell you. Shameless plugs aside. You can also use your heroic interventions to protect objectives. So we have the Swarm Lord here, who's got a big old 50mm base. And as you can see, here's the actual objective marker, which is only 40mm. If your character's base is 40mm or larger, so things like Primaris characters or Terminator characters, any of those are going to be on the correct size base, and they sit directly on top of the center of that objective marker. The radius of their heroic intervention area entirely encompasses the objective, because in order to control an objective marker, you have to be within 3 inches of it, and to be within 3 inches of it, you're going to be within 3 inches of the character standing directly in the middle of the objective marker. It doesn't work so great for units with smaller bases, so for example, the Chapter Master here, if he's standing directly in the middle, there's a little sliver on the edge that you won't be able to heroically intervene into, but he could also stand somewhere like this and just make it more difficult for a unit to come in. They'd kind of have to come in the back in order to escape his heroic intervention. So that's one way you can protect an objective with a character, and this is actually a mistake that I make constantly. Almost any time a character is moving to an objective, it behooves you to put them in a position where they can heroically intervene into models going up to the objective. Even if you're not going to do that, it's still helpful, unless you're doing something specific like trying to keep them out of range of something, or inside a particular aura, or out of line of sight. And I make this mistake very often in the late game. My Hive Tyrants are running around the table, and oftentimes they're charging and piling in and consolidating onto objectives, and I don't put them in the center, and it comes back to bite me every time. So this is a very important one to keep in mind, especially if you play a lot of very active characters. It's also a good instance to talk about how to defeat heroic interventions. So let's say that we want to control this objective, but we're worried about the Swarm Lord coming in and attacking us. Now, heroic interventions, just like pile-in and consolidate moves, have to move towards the closest enemy unit, which means we could, for example, put this Chapter Master right next to the Swarm Lord. He can be just outside of 1 inch. Maybe he had to advance to get onto the objective and isn't going to be able to charge or anything like that. Then we can put a tactical squad on the other side of the objective as far away as possible from the Swarm Lord. This means that the tactical squad is going to be obsecking the objective away. The Tyranid player would love to come get them, but in order to do that, his heroic intervention move would have to take him away from the Chapter Master, and that's not legal. That's a big no-no, which means the Swarm Lord would just have to go fight the Chapter Master. Chapter Master might be able to bounce him on his Storm Shield, and you retain control of the objective with the tactical squad. Now, the other way to defeat heroic interventions is to engage the unit in melee. So if we just charged him with the Chapter Master, obviously he wouldn't be able to heroically intervene into the tactical squad. Now, the last tactical tip I'm going to talk about in this video seems like a very simple one, but it is surprising how often I see players not doing this, and that is using cover or utilizing cover to protect your units. When cover, and especially things like light cover or heavy cover from area terrain, is applied, it is applied on a model per model basis, which means if you're inside a piece of terrain that gives cover, each model that is within the area of that terrain is going to be receiving the benefits of that cover. When that unit is attacked, you, as the controlling player of the unit, assigns the saves as you see fit, which means that if not all of your unit is in cover, the models who are touching the cover will still get the benefit, and you can elect to take saves on them first. Obviously, you'll have to remove them if they die, which means that obviously if they're removed, you won't be able to get the benefits of the cover on the future models taking saves in the unit, but you can still potentially bounce a lot of attacks off those models and take overall less damage on your unit. So for example, we want this Terminator squad to hold down this objective. Terminators have a 2+ armor save, which means that with the addition of cover, they go down to a 1+ armor save, so essentially they're ignoring the first point of AP that would hit them because it would move them from a 1+ to a 2+. You still always fail on a 1 even if you have a 1+ save, but it does help a lot. Now, we want to hold down the objective, but we want to be as defensive as possible. So what we could use is the coherency of our unit to place some of our models, when we move these guys, in cover. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4 in cover, then have this guy in coherency touching the objective to hold the objective. Now, any enemy models that are attacking this unit will have to be dealing with the 1+ armor save on those Terminators that are in cover. You can take saves on those guys and remove them first, which means your opponent is going to have to kill 4 models with the benefit of cover before they can deal damage to the guy who's actually standing on the objective. Now, obviously, this is a pretty extreme example, but one thing I do see people doing relatively often is moving their models into a central position if they're trying to take board space or something like that, and moving them entirely off of terrain, when even having one model hanging in the back of the unit and standing on that area terrain is going to make that unit much more difficult to kill, especially if they already have a good base armor save like these Terminators do in order to use the benefits of that cover. You can start taking the saves on this guy first. If it's low AP or maybe mid AP shooting, he can actually eat a lot of that damage on his cover save and shrug a lot of the damage that the unit would normally take. And that's it. That's 5 real quick tactical tips that I see players forget all the time and can immediately improve your games of Warhammer 40,000. Thanks so much for watching to the end of the video. I want to throw a real quick shout out to all the channel supporters over on Patreon at patreon.com/tacticaltortoise, the YouTube channel members that you can join in the button down below the video, as well as Twitch subscribers over at twitch.tv/tacticaltortoisetv. Y'all are awesome, and I really appreciate everyone who keeps Tactical Tortoise ticking along. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.